Okay, so here's the chair, kind of the carcass here, all assembled. You can see that I've put both sides together, and these have the screw plug holes filled, and using the chisel and the scraper flush here. Everything is nice and flat on top, and you see all of the braces there, the stiles in between, those are all put in place. And I've also taken the time just using a basic block plane to round over all these corners, and I'll have that in a little bit as well, show you how to do that. I'll show you how to do the bottom of the legs too. You can see that those have kind of a taper on them, more of a contemporary feel. And this piece across the front, the brace here, this has kind of a nice gentle arch underneath it. And I did that in the back as well. I thought that gave it kind of a nice feel to it and softened it a little bit. I think it also kind of matched the rounded feel in the legs here too, but still keeps kind of that robust, chunky feel to it. So obviously you can tell this is an adaptation to the time-honored Morris chair, and I made a few adjustments, and I wanted to paint it because I think that fits our style a little bit better. So everything is made out of pine and fir. And you can see here as well, I put this little leaf design in here. I like this. I put this in a lot of my furniture. Just something that adds a little more detail, but not overdone and not too much carving. So I'll show you how to do that as well. And I also put that same leaf pattern on all four of the stiles there on the side. Okay, so right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I cut the stiles here for the four on the side, and then we'll carve those, and then how I cut this piece and put the arch in there. Okay, I guess one other thing I should point out is to put this whole piece together, once you kind of saw me assembling both the sides, really all I did was I cut 3 pieces. You can see the front piece and the 2 back pieces. I cut all those and made sure they were exactly the same length, because they're all going to hold the chair to be a perfect width apart, so they all have to be perfect. Of course, made sure they were all square. And then all I really did was clamp the whole thing together, position them in place, put a little bit of glue in the joint, and then put 2 more lag bolts through here. Here you can kind of see how I offset the lag bolts. These 2 are a little bit higher. They go into the side. These 2 are right in between, a little bit narrower, and they go into the front piece. I did the same on the back. Just kind of offset these like that. Check your square by measuring diagonals across here and across here. Because some of the lumber isn't perfect, for this stuff is, but the legs that I buy, it's just a 4x4x8. They call it a whitewood at the home center. They're really not perfectly square, so I'm okay with that. And instead of going through the painstaking measurements and trying to run them, through the joiner and stuff like that, what I did is I just put them together, saw if there was a little bit of a distance or a gap here, and then just cut these at a little bit of a bevel to adjust for the legs. It took maybe an extra 15 minutes to do that, and it was never off by more than 1 or 2 degrees. But I just adjusted it so there was a really nice tight fit here and a tight fit there. Okay, so let's take a look at cutting the all of those stiles for the side. Okay, so we have these 4 stiles cut, and you can see here before I cut them, to save myself a little bit of time, I rounded over all of the edges and did a lot of them, like a longer board at one time. So, alright, so all we're going to do is find what we think is maybe the best side here, and I made a template. put a couple pieces of tape on each side just to help strengthen that. And then what I do is just line it up here with my eye, center it, and then trace all three of these little symbols, three little leaves, and I center it on here. I use this on a lot of different pieces, so I just have this laying around and it works pretty well. Okay, so next what we'll do is I'm going to hold this down with a hold fast. That'll kind of lock it into place. So there's a couple different methods you can use for this. Everyone has their favorite. I made this kind of a carver's mallet. It's out of a hard maple on a spring pole lathe that I made. Very, very, very much, or a lot of work working a spring pole lathe. Google it if you want to know, or look it up online, I should say, if you're a DuckDuckGo kind of person or whatever. But you can take this and then put your chisel in here and then just kind of tap as you go along. That works probably a little bit better for a V chisel like this, or a V-shaped chisel, where you just line it up here and tap, and then lift it up a little bit at the end. And you can go about it that way. I think that works pretty good. I tend to like to just do this, where you kind of wiggle a little bit and outline the shape, come out at the end, over on this side, outline the shape. Technically, if you want to, you should follow the grain, so when you get halfway, spin around and go back this way. Now remember, you can't cut anything like a hand or a finger that is behind a chisel, so never be doing it like this or holding your piece down. Come out in the end. So the V-chisel works pretty well, and while I'm going to be painting this, I still want these to show up or be somewhat pronounced, so I have to make these fairly deep. I'm old now, so I have to take my glasses off to see things close up. Alright, I'm not that old. And I tend to leave the line, so I see exactly where everything's going. Keep your chisels nice and sharp, and you can cut like I am, kind of against the grain. And that works just fine. I know that some of this will be filled in with the paint. That's okay. It'll still give an idea of the little leaves there. Okay, so you can continue with this. That would be fine. Sometimes I like to use this, just a little, kind of a really, really flat scoop. And you can come in here, cut down from the side, and just go about halfway down. Come back on this side. Make sure I can do this backwards so you can see that. And just cut down inside, and that will come out nice and clean. Carving softwood like this, or a sapwood like this, high quality, but still it's a sapwood, New Zealand pine, can be a challenge. Just be patient and try not to take too much out at a time. I apologize if I'm covering that up. I'll try to do it from this side as much as I can. And then just get it really sharp up on the corner there, so you have a nice point. And if need be, you can always come back right in the middle just to make a nice clean cut with your V chisel. So this one, let's just do this one with the V chisel. Again, I sometimes just like to wiggle along there. You bring out one kind of little crescent shape. Over on this side, bring out another little crescent shape. And then one more right down the middle, and you're done. So a couple different ways to carve these and to clean them up. This one could probably be a little bit deeper. I'm not as good at wiggling with my left hand here, but I want you to see it. There we go. That's okay. Don't try to make them perfect. No good piece of woodworking that hands have touched is perfect. You know, I wanted to say too, this carving technique is great, and everyone has their own method. I like watching some of the videos from the Woodwright shop showing Mary is her name, carving on there. You can learn a lot from her. Roy has her on sometimes. If you're not familiar with the Woodwright shop, I'm always cautious about mentioning where I learned some of my stuff because I don't want it to seem like an endorsement of them, of me. So that certainly isn't the case, but watching some of her carving techniques is really helpful. The other thing too is earlier when we did the when I showed you how to dress the cabinet scraper, that is all from the Woodwright shop and Roy Underhill. If you haven't read it, go to your library or buy Working Wood with Wedge and Edge, and there's a few drawings in there, but the paragraph description is what you need to read to really learn how to dress those cabinet scrapers. And he has a couple of episodes where he does that as well. Anyway, they're endorsing my work in no way, but I also want to share with you where I learned a lot of my knowledge. So, okay, so I will clean these up with the scraper, and I'll use again the rounded edge here, and I'll go this way so you can see it. But that'll take most of my pencil lines off of there. And since I'm painting this, it doesn't totally matter, but there'll be a little bit of pencil lines on there. But I'm going to, when I paint this with white, when I'm done after a couple coats of white, I'll just lightly sand these edges so you see a little bit of that wood in there, just to give it a little bit of a weathered look. Alright, next I think we'll look at making the arched brace for the front of the chair. Okay, so for the brace here on the front, we want to put an arch on here, like this one. So we'll take a piece of 5/4 stock and we're going to cut it off here. We want to make sure that we cut all three of these pieces, the two arched pieces for the front and the back, and the one straight piece for the back, exactly the same length, so that when the chair goes together, it's all nice and square. So what I've done is I cut one before, and the way I made this arch here was to simply, I put a nail here, and here, and then bent the ruler between them, and then let the bow, or kind of the flex of that, dictate my pencil line. So now for the next one, all I'll do is lay this on here. I keep this cut out and simply trace this onto this board. We'll cut it here, and then we'll take this over to the bandsaw. Okay, so at the bandsaw, I've set my depth here and to this 5/4 stock. And I'm going to, when I cut, just like usually, I'll leave the line and just go nice and slow. Right now I have a 3/8 inch blade in there. I believe it's about 6 teeth per inch. It cuts through this pretty well. So turn on our vacuum. Okay, so over here at the vise, we have our board that we just cut with an arch in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that arch real tight in the vise. And I'm going to work on this side first, because you don't want to come up against the grain. You want to come down with the grain. And I'm going to use, I have a spoke shave here. These are pretty inexpensive, about $25. Some of your local hardware stores might have them, or home centers. You might have to order them online. This one is flat with a blade in here, and this one has a curve to it. A little bit harder to work with, the curved is. And these aren't perfect, but I like that they help me to do curved pieces without a whole bunch of sanding. So what I will do is, a lot of people like to push this away from them. I like to pull it toward me. So I always turn it a little bit at an angle like this, and then just pull it toward you. Trying not to take off too much at a time. There you see, you get a decent shaving off of there, and it starts to clean it up. Sometimes it'll get bunched up there. I'll have to get my knife out. Clean it out a little bit. But you can see how it starts to shape up a little bit. The nice thing about this is you can also use it to round over your corners. So just do a little bit this way, a little bit this way. And now we stop right when you get to the middle here. So you might have a little bit of chatter, trying to get it to chatter, but it's not doing it, which is actually an okay thing. There. And that's working pretty well. So on here, I take my flat scraper, look for the good edge here, and then I can use this. Oh, we got some tear out there. Sometimes that happens. actually pretty comfortable with how that's looking there. So that's how you do it, and then we just flip it around and do the other side. Sometimes in the middle here, you may have to use your scraper just a little bit where the two sides meet, but that's not a ton of extra work. And you can always touch it up with a little bit of that 60 grit sandpaper, which I will do all of this with just a couple of passes of that 60 grit sandpaper to smooth it out a little bit, but also to give it a little bit of texture to accept the paint as well. I don't go any finer than this is this is 60 grit here. I don't go any finer than that, and that accepts the paint and really lets the paint grab onto it. Okay, so we'll finish this up, and then you already saw me carve the in here. I would also carve the little leaf pattern. You saw me do that in the other one, so I'll just move on. And now we have the whole carcass together. I guess next what we'll do is we will do the arms, the two arms. One thing I did forget to show you is this is the arched piece here. While I'll round this over, I also want to round the top of this over as well. And I will simply put that in my vise. And I just want to put kind of a chamfer on here first, and then it will have a nice even chamfer, and then I will round it over. So I am using really tried and true, I like this, 25 bucks at the home center, Stanley block plane. I keep the chisel very sharp. I use my own kind of sharpening process, and I use like a sandpaper, really high grit sandpaper, fine grit sandpaper on a marble stone. So again, hold this at a little bit of an angle, and just nice and easy drag it across. This pine has a nice even grain, but sometimes if you start to see a little bit of tear out, you might have to reverse direction. But just try to read your wood. You'll know when it starts to tear out because it looks really bad and it's something you wouldn't want for the final piece. Keep your tools nice and sharp, and they do a lot of the work for you. Okay, so that's about a 1/4 inch chamfer on there. So what I'm going to do now is to round this over. I'm just going to come up here, if this is 45 degrees, come up here to like 22.5 or so, and run my plane along there. Take a little bit of that, about half of that, so this is like 1/8 of an inch, and then angle it even more. And kind of taper it down into the front. Couple more really on a high angle there, and this one up here almost flat there. If you need to tune it up a little bit, you can, but you see how it has like this kind of variegation here, or the almost little fluting there. I don't mind that. I actually prefer that, because when I paint these chairs, you'll see after I paint them on the edges, I will take this 60 grit sandpaper and just kind of scuff it along there. And what happens is these little raised areas here where the plane has not fully rounded it, they will catch on the sandpaper and it'll knock some of that white paint off of there. And I kind of like the feel of that. Plus, if you wanted to just put a finish on this, natural tung oil finish or something, even a varnish. I don't mind that, but if you really don't like that and you want it to be perfect, well, just get a router with a roundover bit and do it that way. I'm not a huge fan of routers. They look just too uniform and too perfect for the kind of wood that I like. I like it to look like hands touched it. But if I were to take this and round it over, this sandpaper cleans it up pretty fast. And you can see that that looks just as good as a round over with probably a 3/8 inch round over bit. So I did this to all of the pieces. I did it to the legs, I did it to the stiles that were carved in the middle, and all the cross braces, everything. Just knock the corners over a little bit. It gives it a nice finished look.